Hey, everybody, welcome to a very special episode. Well, they're all very special, but this, I think, would be episode 4. And for those of us growing up in Canada, you would know this individual. This is the one, the only Fred Penner. I was joking with Fred a little bit earlier that when the cat came back, Mr. Johnson only had to wait a day for the cat to come back. So in my case, Zero is probably going to interrupt a number of times as she tends to do. And so without further ado, I'd like to welcome, and I hope you'll all give a warm welcome to the one and the only Fred Penner. Fred, thank you so much for joining me. I'm quite thrilled that you agreed to do this. It's wonderful to have you here.
It's a pleasure, Corey. I like chatting. It gives me something to do. I'm in the midst of a knee surgery recuperation, so I'm just sort of lounging here in my home on Vancouver Island.
Beautiful place, though.
A beautiful place, and it was 1 month ago yesterday that I had my second knee surgery, and so I went for a walk today, so it all seems to be working well. Anyway, so I'm delighted to be speaking with you. Thank you.
Likewise, yeah, you'd mentioned that. How's it going? Was it were you in too long? It's the recuperation that's crazy with knee surgeries. I have more than a few friends that have had to deal with it.
Yeah, it's I think because this was my second, and my first knee surgery was a little more serious because I had lost all cartilage in my left knee, and I was bone on bone, so it was pretty seriously compromised. But the right knee was not quite as bad, so the healing seems like it's been a little bit faster, because I knew what to expect. I've got my exercises together, but at this point, I'm trying to take care of myself as best as possible, and it seems to be working. But thanks for asking.
Well, you look great. Well, you're probably not going to be off your legs for long. So, obviously we'll go into some stories later, but what are you up to these days? Because you're still very, very active and you're still doing performances. So I think a lot of us would love to hear what you're up to now that don't know.
Yeah, it's pretty sporadic now. Since COVID hit, that sort of stopped a lot of my touring. Just prior to COVID, I was in the midst of my 40th anniversary Cat Came Back tour, which ended in it wrapped up in Edmonton. We'd done dates across the east and the west as well, and we got as far as Edmonton. And I'm on stage. I'm ready to go in an hour and a half, and the health authority came on and said, "Sorry, we're shutting it down." So we just scrambled and came back to the island and have been here ever since. So I'm not touring certainly as much as I did before. I've got a few festivals every once in a while, some island dates. This year, 2025, is going to be a busier year than I've had for a while. I've got coming up in May, the end of May, I'm doing a week's worth of shows at Young People's Theatre, YPT, in Toronto.
Yeah.
And I'm excited about that. I've done some stuff there. We did a stage play of The Cat Came Back years ago with some friends. And so it's going back to that theater for a week. And then I'm doing the Children's Festival in Winnipeg. I'm doing a teachers conference in Winnipeg in July. The Folk Festival in Winnipeg, their 50th anniversary. And then in December, the 14th in Winnipeg at the Burton Cummings Theatre for my every second year Christmas show. So, there's a batch of things that'll keep me busy and active and maintaining my chops, and that's really important for me.
That's fantastic, and we'll make sure we put some graphics that show up for the dates, and then put a plug in if you have them, so that people can go, and we can put a link if people want to get tickets or whatever. So anybody that's watching, if they want to go, either themselves or with their family, we'll make sure that we plug that. So that sounds fantastic.
Nice. Okay.
And Young People's Theater, there's I'm a transplant. I'm not originally from the West. I'm originally from Ottawa, and then I was in Toronto for many, many years. So the Young People's Theater has an awful lot of history to it, though. I I know the Elephant Show, they did a lot of performances and stuff there. The Air Farce did performances there in their
Oh,
radio
sure.
days. There's
Yeah,
a lot of Canadian broadcast personality history there going back to probably 70s, 80s at least. I don't know when it
easily.
opened.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a beautiful theater. It's really well organized and run. And the artistic director now is a pal from Winnipeg. His name is Herbie Barnes, and I had been doing a series in Winnipeg, oh, probably 10, 15 years ago, called TP Tales. It was an indigenous based puppet show, and I wrote all the music for the series. And Herbie was one of the characters on this show, and he's just a beautiful actor and a lovely human being. And he went to Toronto and became the artistic director of YPT. So we've had connection, over the last number of years, and I've done a couple of things there for their celebrations. And this year he called and said, how would you feel about doing a week's worth of shows? I'll do some kids, some school performances during the week and public performances on 2 weekends. So I said, yeah, absolutely. Just out of respect for him and certainly for the theater itself, I'm very excited to be going back there.
That's fantastic. And what kind of things do you, well, don't want to give away any surprises, but what
Yeah.
kind of things do you think people, a sneak peek of what people might be looking forward to when they go to any of these performances that you've got coming up this year?
I mean, there's no sneak peek. I mean, what you see is what you
Fair enough.
get, pretty much the way it's been for a while. But it is all about connection with the audience. Uh, Participation is certainly high on my list, because I want the audience to feel like they are part of this process of singing along, of listening, of discovering some new material I may be bringing to the table. So but it's I think it's the purity of a solo guitar player, songwriter on stage sharing this energy with an audience. And in this time of technology, and in big shows and lots of lights and all of that insanity, that can be a little overwhelming in my mind. That and in balance to some of the extreme technologies that are happening, it's going to the other side. It's going to the absolute basic fundamental aspects of performing, and that's important for me, and the audience relates to it on a deeper level, I think, that way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The other thing is the music of the performance has nothing else to fall upon other than its honesty and basically its quality.
Sure. Yeah, it's simple in that point of view, and I love when I'm performing to take an audience through a journey. It's not just a bunch of fun songs and lack 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 clap 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 and gone, but it's attempting to truly engage with the audience, and it's clear connection. It's hi, how are you? Come along with me on this trip, and then the songs have waves to them, where it'll be up, and then it'll come down to a quieter story time. I've been part of my Cat Came Back tour was specifically doing three uh, videotape stories that were or songs that had videos connected to them. I don't expect I'll be doing that this round, but certainly the storytelling quality that I've always enjoyed when I was growing up in hearing storytellers on television or the radio. So I'm trying to bring some of what I remembered from my own childhood forward to this audience. I'm looking forward to it. I am.
That sounds fantastic. I was actually wanting to speak to that point a little bit. You kind of came to television the other way. You've always been a musician, and you were approached by the CBC as a result, I believe, of your musical performances and your background as a musician,
Hmm.
unless I'm unless
Yeah,
I'm
no,
wrong
you
about that.
no, you're right on. You've been reading the copy accurately. No, I've told this story, dozens and dozens of times. I had been, um, excuse me, did the first album in the late '70s. Excuse me again, and I was working with Raffi's company in Toronto,
Hmm.
and we produced 4 albums with his company, and I was doing, because the early '80s was the heyday for children's entertainment in North America, and certainly
Oh
in
yeah.
Canada, with Raffi and Sharon Wilson Bram, myself, and a handful of others. But we were touring coast to coast at festivals, at soft seat concerts, and the audiences were so hungry to have entertainment for their children. This was the baby boomers who were having kids, so that was the
Hmm.
demographic that we were playing to. And after 4 years of doing that, and building a pretty solid reputation across the country, I got an out of the blue phone call from Dodie Robb, and she was the head of children's television at the time. And Dodie basically said, "We've been following your evolution, your progress across the country, and wondering if you would like to do a TV series." They were looking for a replacement for the Friendly Giant, who'd been on the waves for a long, long time. And so I said, "Well, I'm overwhelmed. I'm so grateful for this opportunity, but what do you want me to do? Do you have an idea?" And she said, "No, we don't have an idea. What would you like to do?" I said, "Are you kidding?" So I don't know if this would ever happen again, but basically CBC put it in my lap and said, "We're interested in your ideas, in your concept." And so, as I generally do when I'm writing a song or trying to come up with an idea of something to present to an audience, I go back to my own childhood. I think about what were the things that were important to me when I was young. And I was in Scouts and Cubs when I was growing up. I loved the outdoors. So I thought, well, that's a good starting place. I don't want my series to be the kind of thing where you just knock on a door and somebody comes in. I want my show to have a journey connected to it. So I made the opening that it was me running across a field, following a fence, you know, crossing or turning around a tree, something that indicated outdoors. And finally, which I I pat myself on the back for, was the entrance into Fred Penner's place was through a hollow log. And I
Everybody
thought,
remembers the log. I think that's what we all like remember a lot. But if there's the one thing that I think that all of us remember when we were watching when we were kids, it's the log. And a lot of us, myself included, wished we had a log that big that we
truly,
could
and
fit through and do that. And there was one that was
yeah.
close by when I was a kid, but it didn't go anywhere. And I remember being so disappointed.
Yeah, a lot of, if I had been in the merchandising business, I thought was the wrong a wrong direction to go. I wasn't about trying to make Fred Penner product. This was
Mm.
not about that. But a lot of people have sent me messages asking, where was that log? I've searched for it in Vancouver and Winnipeg, and I can't find it anywhere. And well, because it was a human made log,
Yeah.
but initially it was a full 6 foot log that I crawled through, and then as the seasons went on, we didn't really require a full log anymore. So it was cut down where you just saw maybe a third of it, and I just walked up a couple of steps and through the log. But it looked like a full log. I hope I'm not spoiling anybody's concept of the show, but it was such a truly um, exciting, creative, and powerful opportunity for me to create something that has endured and is still, deeply settled in the minds and spirits of of generations. I would never have thought that would happen. I mean, that wasn't part of my pursuit. Even making my first record was something I hadn't thought would ever happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then that evolved, and then all these things kept flowing. Every number of years, something else would come along and would ask me to be creative in whatever direction I could handle. So I've had a very, very blessed path in my journey, and it's not over. I'm still finding new things and new exciting things to occupy my time and my creativity. And I'm working on a book, on a memoir, trying to write up stories that I recalled from my upbringing, my adulthood, my career, and we'll see if that goes anywhere ultimately. But it's a good life, Corey. It's a good life.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. And it's funny having gone into television after, like, obviously the older and obviously needed to have a job, and I went into television myself. One thing I wanted to mention about the log before we went back to that was that having had the good fortune to work with some of the CBC prop people, I just want to kind of give, no pun intended, but a prop to just how amazing the CBC props department was and is.
Yeah, no, they truly are. They've got some equipment that can create anything. They have I'm not even sure what you'd call it, but it's a big machine that can duplicate items. So if you wanted like simply a dozen big boxes, you could put a box on this thing, and this shrink wrap plastic would create that. So they could make, or trees or logs,
Vacuform.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's
it's a
what it was,
large
yeah.
vacuform machine.
Yes,
They're
exactly.
amazing. You paint
Yeah.
them all up and you put them together, and it's just amazing.
Yeah, and they're easily movable. The when I came up with the idea of a natural environment, there were two plants in Canada that were looking for production. Actually, three plants: Vancouver, Winnipeg, and Halifax.
Mhm.
All had staff who needed work, and they wanted to develop a new TV children's series, but it made more sense for Winnipeg and Vancouver than to include Halifax in that mix. So we did that, and the designer in Vancouver was Lawrence Collette was his name, and he really was a fantastic artist, and he drew out the sketches of what he was looking for, which had very much a rainforest kind of feel to it. So as we're living here, my wife and I, in Vancouver Island, when we go for hikes, it's really almost tearful as I walk through the woods, remembering that that's the way Fred Penner's place was. But he did amazing work, and having the opportunity again to bring many really top-notch, talented Canadian musicians into Fred Penner's place to share their talent with my audience. That was another side of the thing that I'm so grateful for.
You're also in one of the most beautiful places on earth, so you have a really good reference point, I would say.
Yeah.
So how did you now? Those that have not been in television sometimes get a bit of a shock as to how much work it is, although it is fun, but it can be very long days. How did you find, like, when you went into production, I guess, what would have been late 84, early 1985?
Into 85, yeah. 85 to 97 was the stretch.
How did you, just going into that, how did you find it splashing and suddenly having your own show and then having all this stuff and have it come to life and just dealing with the sheer amount of content you have to put out, so long days and whatnot?
It was interesting. I had no hesitation that I would be capable of doing that to the best of my ability. I had pretty good creative juices, and and particularly spontaneous energy. So I could play with the scripts at will. And initially the scripts were not specific enough in what the dialogue or the monologue would be, or the dialogue with the audience, or even the dialogue with the guests that would come on. It would be sort of stations and where you would go, because there were a number, many areas that we could set up and play from. But the opening would be Fred crawls through the log, greets the audience, goes to get his guitar, sings da-da-da song. Fred introduces a topic and goes to the play area. So it was all that really generic kind of movement, which allowed me to be very spontaneous and to be as connected with the viewer as possible. This was an interesting thing, and a bit of a tangent.
No, not at all.
When we were doing the show, and this was a really important thing that I learned from a lot of theater class in the 70s. I did a lot of straight theater, like Death of a Salesman or musical comedy or radio television drama. And when you're on a stage, the person at the back of the theater should feel as connected as the person at the front. So it's all about, using your eyes to scan and to include, an audience. But when you're doing a television series, you only have one camera that you're working with.
That's right.
So the attitude is, the thought is, that camera is going to one child. It is going to thousands, but if you approach it as if you're just talking to the one child, then there's a level of intimacy that comes from that perspective. So I loved doing that. There was no projection really that had to happen to a bigger group. It was intimate, and it was, how are you doing today? It's great to see you. Come here, I want to show you something. And then so you really felt like you were part of a very personal conversation with this bearded guy, through the television waves. But that was a lovely part of it, and I think because I could do that, it made me feel more relaxed. So even though we did, many shows, it was not really overwhelming. I knew the music. We had a rehearsal with a good band, and it had a flow. That's it. The whole series had a flow. The crew, the musical director, the floor director, everybody was committed to making this the best children's show that we possibly could.
And it was a tight band too. I remember there seemed to be, it seemed that everybody had, like, just looking back at it as an adult.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I was talking to Eric Nagler the other day, and we were talking about this too. And it's like, none of these, like your band that, obviously you didn't see them, but we could hear them. And the band that basically toured and was with Sharon, Lois, and Bram and Eric, like, they weren't phoning it in. None of your bands were ever phoning it in.
Yeah.
I even listening to it now, like, a lot of the time they're just shredding, especially the bass player. Your bass player, I remember he was really,
oh, that's sweet. Yeah, those players, they were not the musicians that I went on tour with. These were, I have other friends and musicians that I toured with. Those fellows were the cream of the jazz musicians in Winnipeg. The musical director, his name was Dave Jandrish, who sadly passed away this year.
I know that name. I didn't actually know that he was. I know the name.
Yeah. Dave Jandrish was a musical director for for just about any show in Winnipeg. Top notch. The bass player who also did guitar and banjo, his
Mhm.
name was Ron Halderson, and Ron was just a powerful jazz force in Winnipeg, and the drummer was Reg Keln, and the three of them were, as I said, the some of the best musicians in the country, and so when I would our process when I was heading in to do a series of shows, however many, 3 sometimes 5 a day. The songs would be defined in the scripts, or I might even have a new song that I wanted to try out that day, and we would go in. I'd go into the music room. We'd work through the songs. I'd maybe teach them a new song. Dave would chart all the songs for the other band members. We'd practice them a couple of times. I'd head to makeup, head to the floor, and then away we would go. But it was really a fast, clean process because everybody had the same vocabulary,
Yeah.
and that makes such a difference. And because Dave could take, if I had, like a really a new tune that I may have been writing on the way to the studio, which I did sometimes.
Hmm.
He immediately was able to chart it, give it to the guys, away we go, and that made everything very smooth and so much easier than if we really had to fight to get a tight arrangement.
These Western jazz guys, man, Winnipeg, uh, Edmonton, Calgary, even Regina, like just something about these guys. There's no shortage of just these unbelievable jazz musicians that can just do anything. And they're like, oh yeah, no problem.
I know some of your viewers, listeners, may, if you go back a couple of decades to the Winnipeg jazz scene, there was a arguably one of the top musicians, guitar players on the planet. His name was Lenny Breau, Breau, and Lenny. It's hard to describe his talent. If you get a chance to go and check out some of the videos that he did way back, but the bass player and drummer were Lenny's backup players. So that gives you an idea of how powerful they were as musicians.
That's
Anyway.
I wonder if he worked with John Stroll, because I feel like I remember. Do you know John? John is Skycron's music director, but he was the music director now. He and I are really good friends. We've been friends for 15 years.
I don't know the name.
Yeah, he did. He scored all the. He basically scored all of the Raccoons for CBC.
Oh, that's
so he
great. That's really fabulous music. That was.
Yeah. He and I was actually helping. This is totally. I just remember going through because I was helping John and Kevin Gillis just go through all the masters and clean them up, and it was really interesting hearing them straight from 2-inch tape on DAT. And I feel like I remember John talking about him.
Okay. How old is John?
John would be. He's gonna kill me if he doesn't look his age. He's in his. He would be. I guess. I think he's 76 this year.
Yeah. So he's definitely in that.
Yeah.
In that age frame.
Yeah, because I remember him mentioning that. I'll talk to him about it later. I got to call him tonight. It's funny how these names sort of float around. But yeah, these musicians, I'm constantly blown away by how fantastic everybody is. Actually, when did you? I don't want to do I'm not as good a musician as you, but I'm a musician as well. I toddle along and I get some pennies from heaven from SoCan here and there from TV shows. But how did you come to? I mean, everybody's got their story about when they were a kid or when they came to that get involved in music and they pick up the instrument or the guitar or
Yeah.
the whatever. They usually have a story, and it's probably your entire life. When did you
Yeah.
know? Like, how did you come to be a musician? Which I know sounds like a stupid question, but you know what I mean. I think.
No, no, no. I understand that because I mean, I grew up with a wonderful variety of sound. My parents were into classical music, opera, orchestral music, so there was that happening in the house all the time. And they were also into the swing music of the 40s. So the Benny Goodman, the Dorsey brothers,
Mm-hmm.
the Louis Armstrong, that world. So I grew up listening to that really incredible range of sound, and I mean right away I was into I could feel the groove. I mean kids when there's a pulse of music happening, you feel it in your body,
You
you feel
sure
it in your
do.
heart. But I was able to reproduce some of those sounds. I could sing along to some of that stuff. I have an older brother and sister, 9 and 10 years older, so they were into uh, the the boy bands of the 50s. From the Four Lads or the Four Aces, into Elvis
Mm-hmm.
and the country groups then. So that was another layer of sound that consumed me. And then as I didn't start playing guitar till I was 15, and prior to that, I'd learned little bits on piano from my sister and my sister-in-law, my older brother's wife.
Mm-hmm.
They taught me, basic chord structure. Here's
Yeah.
here's a C. Here's learning how your fingers move to make a different progression. And then when I got my first guitar when I was 15, it was, okay, transferring some of that knowledge to the fingers, and you get the basic, because I never had lessons. I just got the chord books and bled for my
Yeah.
art, and and got better. And then friends would say, "Oh, have you tried playing a G chord like this instead of like that? Oh, that's cool. Then you can do this, and you can go." So then I learned all these other skills around music, and I have a good ear for melody and for harmony,
Mm-hmm.
so I could be in a jam session. I could harmonize instantly with whatever was going on. So I mean, I'm grateful that the ability to make music has always been with me, and I've been able to nurture it in many directions. On stage doing musical comedy, singing in choirs when I was growing up at a high school and university. Those were important parts of my understanding of musical pattern and form. And that's the one thing in my life that gave me bliss. That I, because I wasn't a great student. I managed to squeak through high school, squeak through university with the BA in economics, but I was not. Clearly that was not going to be my end all.
You got through it
And
though. You finished.
yeah, and I'm proud of that. And I did that to satisfy really my parents' desire for their child. I was the first of my generation to go to university and to get a degree. So I was the good doting son to
Mm.
complete that. And yeah, that gave me, that was gratifying to me and obviously to my parents. But not long after graduating, I had a sister who was born with Down syndrome, and
Mm.
I'm sure your listeners have heard this story numerous times. My sister Susie, who was born with Down syndrome. In fact, today is National Down Syndrome Day, I
Mm-hmm.
believe.
That's true.
Yeah, and so Susie was born with Down syndrome, and she passed away in 1970, and
Mm.
my father died less than a year later. So at this critical turning point in my life, my early 20s, there I was, ready to do what? I didn't want to be an economist. And
Yeah.
so that's when soul searching comes in. It's, well, what is it that gives you personal satisfaction and bliss? And the answer was clear. You love music. So I I worked up a couple of good set lists and started playing the lounges and bars in Winnipeg, and that led to another, a couple of other groups, and we traveled a bit, and it just kept, once you commit to some level of performing, and you are fed, you're energized for doing that, and people say, I enjoyed what you did, that made me feel good, then it just kept blossoming, and it grew, and every couple of years another thing would happen, and I connected with a band in Winnipeg. Perhaps you know Al Simmons.
I sure do. I don't
Yeah.
know him personally, but I certainly know
Yeah.
of him, and I know all about him. And a number of my colleagues have had the pleasure of working with him and have many entertaining
and
stories.
the pleasure it is. Yeah, he's one of the most talented entertainers that I've ever met. And he was looking for players to start a new band back in the 70s. And I came along, plus Bob King, who wrote "Sandwiches Are Beautiful, Sandwiches Are
Yeah,
Fine,"
yeah,
and a drummer named Mike Klim, who in Winnipeg he was with a Ukrainian, an international touring group called the Rusalka Dancers,
Mm-hmm.
and Mike was the touring drummer with them. And anyway, so the four of us had a 4-year run of playing, across Canada. And
You would have had arms of steel playing Ukrainian traditional.
he was he was a rock. He was a solid, he was maybe 5'9", but he looked like Animal from Sesame Street.
And
and
they
he
will
had
play
that-
drum. That's awesome.
Exactly. That was Mike. That was clearly Mike Klim. So that journey was one of the most powerful learning times for me as well. And then when that ended in '77, then everything took the turn towards doing music for families and children, and never looked back from that point.
When I have to ask, I've spent a decent amount of time in Winnipeg. Did you find it and did you find it tough, some of the venues, because in the 70s, because it can get pretty rough for gigging musicians in some of those venues, to put it charitably. Like you earn your stripes doing it, but
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
I
the
know
truth.
more than a few. I have a few buddies that are like, yeah, man, I played this gig. We did a set in Winnipeg, and we didn't get stabbed or shot, and we got $500. Like, were there venues that were this tough in the 70s? There was a little easier.
There was some. Well, the neat thing for us was, if you're a standard kind of bar band,
Yeah.
and you get up there and you're playing essentially the music that the owners want
Yeah.
the audience to drink more. I mean, that's their whole point.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
The more you play, the more you do music that excites the audience, then the more they're going to drink.
Yeah.
But the problem with Cornstalk, that was the name of the band, Cornstalk
Yeah.
Comedy Troupe, was we engaged the audience in real time, in spontaneous activity, in comedy.
Yeah.
So they weren't drinking nearly as much as the owners would like, but the vibe was so much more pleasant.
And the patrons liked it.
The patrons loved it.
That's awesome.
And they, and so we were asked back. We had our core of bars that we would play on a regular basis.
Yeah.
But the because we weren't disconnected from the audience, we were eyeballing, we were looking, we were really, as I do now, inviting the audience to come along on our journey. It's not just close your eyes and and play that guitar riff So
Yeah.
the person has lots of time to drink. We require your eyes and your ears to be part of that trip with us. So as I was saying, that journey with them was a really good training ground for what I've done since then. Of really engaging an audience in as direct a manner as possible.
Handling everything and everybody in every possible scenario that could be thrown at you, you can just deal with it.
Yeah, there were a few stories that got just a little bit tense
Yeah.
that could have led to some bloodshed perhaps.
Okay, so
But
basically
we
it's just a different flavor of the same thing now.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
really.
But you managed to find the hack, to minimize or nearly eliminate your roadhouse moment that is generally
Yeah.
considered part of your baptism by fire as a
Yeah.
gigging musician in Winnipeg.
Yeah, been there, done that. Yeah, there were some really really beautiful moments and a couple of just pay attention, be careful. I'll tell you one quick story.
Mm-hmm.
There was a bar out on PENNER Highway.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, if you're in that area, close to Bishop Grandin Highway,
Mm-hmm.
but it was an odd sort of L-shaped bar, and the stage was at the farthest end of the L,
Mm-hmm.
and there were tables on either side, and this one full moon night we were playing, audience was engaged, loving, and we saw this guy come around the corner, and he was staggering. He clearly had a variety of things to consume, and
Mm.
he had a pie on his hand, and he was
Oh
eyeballing
no.
us, and so we're thinking, okay, here's the guy who's seen the pie in the face trick on television,
Yeah.
and was going to, because we're the fun loving band,
Uh-huh.
he's gonna do the pie in the face to
Yeah.
one of us. Okay, so we're all pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. Look what's coming down the aisle. Okay, this and I don't use the word lightly. This idiot comes up and he trips, and the pie comes flying,
Oh.
and
Oh my God.
it wasn't like a paper plate
Oh
or
no.
an aluminum foil plate. It was a glass Pyrex
Oh,
heavy
what a
heavy plate.
mess.
He throws this pie.
Oh
It
my
hits the
God.
drums. It shatters, and at this point, Mike the drummer has moved away. But
Oh.
the glass goes everywhere,
Yeah.
and this
It just
guy's on
blows
his
up.
face on the. That was a really really stupid thing to do. But there weren't many of those along the way.
Oh my God.
But
I just
but
in Winnipeg, a guy that's completely sauced on and completely tanked, and he's holding a pie and a glass pie. Oh my.
it's a cartoon, Corey.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just a cartoon, and I think that was in his brain. When somebody does something like that,
Yeah.
they're not. There's no reality involved.
No. No.
It is a cartoon.
Yeah.
And so you sort of appreciate it from that point of view, but he didn't think it through.
No. No. I mean,
Yeah.
we've all, I'm sure, well, I can't speak for you. I may or may not have done some pretty dumb things when I was in my 20s and was tanked,
Yeah.
in my post-sec. But I can't say I've ever done that. That's that's pretty up there.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, so going from that, how did you transition into children's entertainment? Because you definitely have the chops, right? Because you'd be able to handle anything from just,
Yeah.
the gigs. How did you transition into that, and how did that come about?
Yeah, that was an interesting turn of events after Cornstalk ended in 77. I was in Toronto, and I met. Right now I'm on my second marriage. My wife and I now, Ray Ellen is her name. We've been together for 13 years.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you very much. And she's just a gem, and she takes really good care of me, and I take good care of her. I hope. But my first wife was a modern dancer in Toronto, and she was coming to Winnipeg to study dance.
Mm-hmm.
And when she came to Winnipeg, and our relationship evolved into developing a children's dance theater company, and it was called Sundance. And from that company, I would write music to go with the dances that she was doing for children.
That's so cool.
And one of the shows that we did was called The Story of Blunder, which was a book from the 1930s that we adapted into stage and audience involvement, and some really good songs. And at the end of one of those performances, a Winnipeg doctor and his wife approached me and asked if I had, because they love my music, they love my singing, said,
Mhm.
"Do you have a record?" And at that point, I had not considered, what it would take to do a record.
Yeah.
And they said, "Well, we really like what you're doing. Why don't, do a record and we'll pay for it?" Okay,
Wow.
well, thank you very much. And essentially, and I'm so chuffed that they even said this, but they basically gave me a blank check, not literally, but figuratively.
No, but
And
yeah.
and it cost about $8,000 to do the album in
Yeah.
1979.
Oh yeah, because you're having to do everything on tape and then do every pressings and
Yeah.
studio time. The clock is ticking, man.
The whole
it's not
exactly
cheap.
the whole thing, and this was in big, the 4-inch tape,
Oh
know,
yeah.
30 IPS. It was
Yeah.
insane.
Yep.
But we did the album, the Cat Came Back album, and coincidentally at that time, I met Rafi, who was in Winnipeg doing a conference,
Mm-hmm.
and I, we hit it off, and he asked me what I was doing. I said, "I'm just working on a record." He said, "Oh, well, when it's done, send us a copy, because we're looking to expand our roster, to include other musicians,
Mm-hmm.
other children's entertainers." So I did that. They loved The Cat Came Back. Excuse me. We made some packaging variations,
Mm-hmm.
and then The Cat Came Back was out on the Troubadour label, and then we did subsequent albums on that. I think the big reason that it turned to children's entertainment at that point was because, I'm a youthful and exuberant kind of person,
Mm-hmm.
because my sister Susie was a huge influence on me, because of her world of Down syndrome and the music that she loved, and we bonded through music,
Mm-hmm.
deeply when I was, preteen even. So connecting with child was very much a part of my spirit. So it seemed like a logical thing to do that, and not just bringing simple 3-chord things to the audience, but some good complex chord progressions that allowed me to explore music to to the level that I felt I was capable of going, but with the family, truly the family audience in mind. So it needed, the music in my mind needed to be complex enough so that the parents and grandparents would appreciate it from that level, and the kids would enjoy it, just because kids love music, any
Of
kind of
course.
music, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it was that was a really interesting turning point, and once that began, it was full steam ahead. There was no turning back, and those next, well, 5-6 years, until Fred Penner's Place came along. Then I, running almost 1,000 episodes there. At the
Yeah.
same time, still touring all over North America. The TV series aired in the U.S. through Nick Jr. for 3 years.
Yeah, that's huge
know.
when you get syndication like that.
Yeah, yeah, it was airing to 50 million homes in the States,
Yep.
and I still get, mail from Americans, particularly border states, who
Yeah.
picked up on the CBC
Yep.
signal. So then it was okay. Here's my bubble. It's got all these potentials, festivals, exhibitions. Doing Knott's Berry Farm in California.
That's
Playing
huge.
Disney World. It built. I was the first children's entertainer to play the Universal Amphitheater in Los Angeles.
That's huge.
Oh yeah,
That's huge.
That was a big deal. So all of these things just kept growing.
Yeah.
And I think because Canada, because of the size of Canada, and I'm talking about Sharon Wilson, Brian Raffi, and myself as the big three in that time, we were able to establish really solid reputations and names, in our genre, in our style, and so that built to that point where, if you're doing a children's festival, here's the people you call, and that again spilled over to the States, and that built, as it did down there. But it was such an incredibly vibrant time until it all sort of crashed and burned in the late 90s when technology came on, and it was cheaper to do animation than pay for a real person to do a show.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a whole other angle of children's television that
I agree. Let's just say I agree with you, and I mean, I won't editorialize too much, but I mean, I used to work in, how do I put this? I'll editorialize a little bit. I worked in animation, but what I would consider to be, without trying to sound sniffy, proper animation, like high quality. I went to Sheridan for a bit. Was at their animation program, and then I went into live action somewhat after. And I know the kind of animation that you're referring to, and I jokingly, based on how I was taught and a lot of my colleagues were taught, it's technically animation, I suppose, in the sense that it moves from left to right, but in our world, we probably wouldn't call that animation. We would call that motion graphics.
Oh, sure.
It's animation. You're not wrong, but I know the kind of stuff you're talking about. And I remember when it started coming out, a bunch of us were sitting at going, this is not.
Yeah, the quality isn't there.
No.
Part of, actually, I shouldn't put all of that turning point on animation coming in. The bigger aspect that really kiboshed the children's industry then was that earlier on in the 80s, record producers saw children's entertainment as, oh, it's just kids stuff. It's just kids stuff. It's just kids stuff. It's all over there. We'll never make any money doing that. So they didn't. The main companies did not, produce children's records. But later, going into the 90s, these companies started realizing, oh, this is a market that we could make a lot of money if we did some really flashy graphics. If we tried to pinpoint the kids on this, so things like Kitty Pops would come out, and
I remember those.
It would be really bad music, but they would advertise it on television, and the kids would say, oh, look at that, look at those bright colors, oh, I want that, and would say to the parents, I want that. The parents would buy this album, the kids would listen to it once and it would be gone. So they did a real disservice to the quality of, really the high quality that we put into making our records, in that time frame. And then it just kept going down, really downhill from there. And then you really can't get that back at that point. And then the technology started coming in, and
Mhm.
it just got too big. You couldn't handle it anymore in a real sense, if you know what I mean.
We're advertising when you know it's a bad sign when something is getting advertised like a K-Tel album
Yeah,
of
yeah, there
the
it is. Yeah.
late 80s,
Oh
which they
boy.
were, which they were
Yeah.
doing. I remember that they were, and it was very, and the engineering was all very kind of compressed and sort of not a lot of stereo separation and that sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, you were there. I
Oh
hear you.
yeah, I was there. I remember even at the time, I was just thinking one second, Tilk, go lie down, go lie down.
Oh, bring her in.
I'll it's just there's no room for him with the camera
Oh yeah.
because of where I
Okay.
have it set up. I have room for the cat. I might swing around. When we're done, I can swing around the and you can meet him. But if he
Oh
goes
yeah.
in here, he'll knock everything down. Sorry, I'm not even looking at the
Okay.
camera now. I'm looking at the dog, and
I
here
got you.
and there, and my eye lines are going. Tilk, we'll let you say hello to Fred after, okay?
Okay.
Okay, lie down. Lie down. He looks like a bear.
Oh my.
He looks like a bear. He's about 140 pounds, and
Ouch.
yeah, he's a big dude. Yeah, my mom. We always had that mix growing up. So
Oh,
when I
okay.
moved to Saskatchewan and had room, we got as soon as we could find a big dude, we adopted him.
Nice. Well, that's great.
So I just wanted to pivot a little bit, but going back to the I'm just sort of trying to get myself sorted because this is all really interesting and it's all really nice to hear this stuff. What I was going to ask you is, I mean, there's no way that one can ever anticipate, but you ever have days where you just think about where it hits you? Because, I mean, we're here 30, 40 years on, and, guys
Where it
like
hits
me,
me
we
from what point of
grew
view?
up with you. We
Yeah.
remember. What is it?
What,
Then there's a lot of us, a lot.
so what do you mean if it that
What
does
does
it
it
hit
feel
me?
like? Do you ever think about it? Like, I mean, you
What
literally
this
made
was?
all of our childhoods, and in
Hmm.
part inspired some of us to go into television
Oh, I
and
see. Okay.
in some ways kind of, and pick up a musical instrument and do something creative.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do get, and I have received lots of really heartfelt um, messages and mail from young adults who do remember the series and fondly, and do attribute their direction in life to something that I might have done. Uh, all I really can say to that is I did and am doing what I do in life to the best of my ability. I believe in the power of music to make a difference in the life of a human. Um, and I've discussed this with my wife along the way,
Mhm.
and she grounds me on this one, because if I spend time saying, "Oh my goodness, I was so wonderful. I made such a difference in so many lives, and aren't I great?" is the only way that could, that could settle. The power.
Mhm.
If you're talking about how that could affect me, and some people are affected to that degree where they
Mm.
think that they really are special because they have made that difference. But the bottom line is, it's none of my business. And that's a real truth that a lot of performers need to adopt, is that if you're doing something that feels really good to you, that you're communicating a song or an idea or a feeling or an emotion that comes from your spirit, from your soul, if that is accepted on that level by another human being, fabulous. But you can't expect that that's what's going to happen.
Mhm.
The only thing that you can be true to is your own integrity to produce, to create. So I am more than honored to know that there are so many people out there who do attribute something to me that they feel I gave them through really essential communication is all this was. It was just me communicating with you in the best possible way that I could, and beyond that, I'm just I'm just an old man with a beard.
Yeah, but if the thing is I think that if what you were doing didn't speak to us when we were kids,
Yeah,
some shows get remembered and some don't. I mean, that's just
yeah.
the honest, brutal truth of it. So
Mm,
whatever it is that you did, whether you're conscious
yeah.
of it or not, you've made that contribution. And I think Zero is absolutely insistent on saying hello if you would like to meet her, because she's driving me
Oh, sure.
crazy. Zero, you want to come over? Because you've been like pawing at me the whole bloody time. Wank, wank, wank. Wank, wank, wank. Yeah, there we go.
Oh,
Here
yeah.
she comes.
I know that sound.
Yeah,
We have
she.
one cat.
Oh man, Zero, you want to say hi? Yes.
I love her name.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, Siamese
yeah.
with
She's a
the
Siamese.
blue eyes.
Yeah, she sure does. Zero.
Oh, those are
Hey.
beautiful.
You
Oh,
see,
look at
it'll
her.
probably be
She's
a little out of
gorgeous.
focus. Yeah, she just turned 10 this year.
Okay.
So we got her when I was still um, living in Ottawa, when I
Yeah.
was still working in Ottawa. In fact, I think might have been at CTV at the time.
Okay.
And she's a pretty well-traveled cat. She's
Oh wow, she's gorgeous.
well, she does this koala thing. So when we go to hotels, she doesn't even go in the carrier. So this is what she does. So
Oh.
whenever I'm trying to do something, this is what she does. She does this koala
No.
cat thing, and she won't leave me alone. She's not a runt, but she's very small. So
Oh,
she's
okay.
only about, I think she's only about 9 pounds the last time
Yeah.
we did our weigh-in at the vet. But
Yeah.
she's very, very lovey, and she's very, very charming. And when
Oh yeah.
she wants attention, she will not be denied.
Yeah.
And
There it is.
I bring her in the studio and everything.
Oh, that's sweet.
So
That's
she's
really lovely.
she's crazy. And then when we're done, I'll swing the camera around and I'll introduce you to our big. So we've got so this obviously, as you know, is Zero. She's
Yep.
named
Great name.
after. Well, she's named after two things. She's named after. Well, actually, the character was a dog.
Okay.
From The Nightmare Before Christmas.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just because there was when she was a kitten, she had some mannerisms that reminded me, like when she would kind of forward.
Okay.
And she's also equally named after the Mitsubishi Japanese fighter jet from the 1940s, because she's fast and brutal and hard to catch.
Is she a stalker? Does she get outside?
No, we had a scare. We have a leash for her and a harness so that
Yeah.
she goes outside. When moved the house in Regina, she got out, and we were worried for sure that I was worried that she had been lost, but Tilk found her. That's the name of the dog. He's named after Stargate. So he found her. She was gone for an evening. I was absolutely beside myself because Regina's. It's not as tough as Winnipeg maybe, but it's still a tough town.
Yeah.
It's a tough
I know
town,
Regina.
especially exactly. Especially when you're in that block, that's not. It's not in the hood, like it's not in North Central, but it's But
Yeah.
so
But
what I
she
was
came
gonna,
back.
yeah, she came back. The cat came back.
She literally came back, and she's, as you can see, she's very
Oh yeah.
needy.
She's
So,
affectionate. That's
oh
sweet.
yeah,
That's very sweet.
she's very affectionate, and she'll anybody that comes here, she well, I don't know, she tends to hang off of me. We don't even have a carrier for her. Like, I mean, we have one, but she
Yeah.
never uses it. When when I drove, when like she just sits in the car, in the passenger side or in my lap or whatever, and she'll just
Oh,
sit
nice.
there. And she made the
Yeah.
trip all the way from Ontario to here, and
Oh
she's
my.
been to Quebec, and she's actually about to go to Vancouver,
Oh.
because we have to go to Vancouver with my crew, because we have our kids sports program is, well, it was running on Czech.
Oh
And
yeah.
then
Okay.
we had to get more episodes done because Czech ran out. So Mike and Elaine and Rob down at Czech, it'll start running. I don't know what it used to run at Saturday mornings at 11:30, but anyway, okay, zero. Yes, I love you, but I have to. Yeah, she's like a little teddy bear. She'll just hang there. She'll literally just sit
boy.
here and hang like this. So what I was going to ask is, oh, okay, yeah, this is what happens when she doesn't get attention. You're going to be a jerk? Yeah, you're going to be a jerk. I'll give you something later when you chill out. So what I was going to ask is there anything that you'd like anybody to know? Well, maybe it would help if I would look at the camera. Look at the camera. At least there's only one, for God's sake. What I was going to say is there anything that maybe I missed that you might want people to know?
Let's see. I mean, I'm living on Vancouver Island now.
Paradise.
There's events that are, that happen out here that I try and get to, or that I perform at on occasion. If people are interested, I'm not real good with my social media world, but I try to post stuff on my website, fredpenner.com. If you want to drop by there, I've got
I'll put the link down below too.
I've got some merch along the way. There's some
Oh,
t-shirts
that's great.
and CDs if you're interested. We can do some commerce on the line. I mentioned where I'm playing this summer, in Toronto, in Winnipeg, Kids Fest, the 50th anniversary folk festival in Winnipeg, and the Burton Cummings in December. So those are our interesting gigs if you're looking for some connection along the way.
And you'll see the graph. Oops, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah,
I didn't
no,
mean
and-
it was a
and-
delay
and
there. Sorry, go ahead.
The one thing that I haven't talked about this very much, but I'll just give you a quick thumbnail, is over COVID, I connected with a composer out of Mississauga, Ontario. His name's Charles Cousins, and we started working on a musical story, and it evolved into a fully orchestrated story that I narrate, and he orchestrated, like full orchestral kind of music. That's where he's at, and it's called John and the Weather Vane Kite, and we're in the process of trying to farm that out, to develop it into either an audio book. It's only a short, like a 45 minutes recorded story, but it's something that maybe along the way that'll be available for listening. And it's really a pretty intense story about love and loss, and rejuvenation, and community. It's a very powerful story, and I hope to be able to share that at some point. But other than that, I'm enjoying life here, working on my memoir and writing my stories and playing my guitar and learning some new chords, even at this point in my life. Life is good, Corey, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
That's fantastic. And I think that's a great lesson for us all. And I'll make sure there'll be links down here for fredpenner.com and some of the amazing merchandise that Fred, I'm sure, has. And honestly, I'm probably going to buy some myself. Fred, so what I'll do is I'll just play us out.
And don't go just yet. I'll talk to you after we
Okay.
finish up. But so for Fred Penner, everybody, Fred, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a real honor to speak to you. I say that from the bottom of my heart with all honesty. So for those of you, thank you for joining us. And, if you have any questions or comments, please, by all means, put them below. We always love to hear from people. And
Sweet.
so the episodes come out every 2 weeks right here on this YouTube channel. And of course, our Patreon, should you, it helps us create more episodes. And of course, the day job is skycron.com/go for those that need high-end production and broadcast. Have a good one, everybody.